Welcome, everyone. I'm Andrea. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Philadelphia on the traditional lands of the Lenape people. I am in recovery from alcohol, anxiety, disordered eating, perimenopause, an empty nest, lots of other things too. I want to welcome you to Recovering Wholeness together with Lynn and Andrea. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Lynn.
Thank you. I'm Lynn. I am, let's see, a wife, mother, grandmother. I live on the traditional territory of the Bay Miwok people in the San Francisco East Bay area. I'm in recovery from alcohol use disorder almost 5 years. Awesome. Yay. I'm getting excited to celebrate that milestone. Um, Anxiety, trauma, loss, patriarchy, the current conditions of the country, many other things for sure. Um, and I work in the field of behavior analysis, behavioral health, and yeah, I think that's it about me. I'm trying to remember what we all say. And then I want to welcome Carrie Varela, who is our guest today. Let me pull up her bio so I can read it. I know her well, but I want to read her bio like the way that it should be read. Carrie Varela is the founder of the Reiki Healing Society and co-host of the Reiki Women Podcast. She is a Reiki practitioner, teacher, yoga instructor, Vedic astrologer, mother, mystic, and modern day healer. She inspires people to connect with spirit, nature, and their truest essence through Reiki, yoga, and Vedic astrology. Carrie has had the privilege to study many diverse lineages of Reiki. In 2023, she traveled to Japan, which I can't wait to hear about, to tour the sacred sites of Reiki, an experience that was both incredible and life changing. With 15 plus years of experience as a solo practitioner, woman owned small business, Carrie is passionate about supporting women to navigate their challenges and gain a stronger connection to their power and purpose. She believes that maintaining courage, joy, and resilience comes more easily when you have the right support. And you can connect with Carrie and the Reiki Healing Society at the link that will be posted below in the YouTube. That whole definition is just totally the definition of recovery. I know that Carrie, you're not necessarily, somebody that advertises yourself as a recovery coach, but I have to say, in reading your bio, like that's a very recovery oriented group of skills that you have. So welcome and thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I thought I'd mention, I'm definitely also in recovery from a few things, but feeling grateful to learning how to recover from my divorce, which is the main topic we're going to talk about today, but also codependency issues. I've had my own drug and alcohol abuse issues throughout my life. Also recovering from grief and trauma and all kinds of things. And I really pride myself on being a resilient person. It's something that I strive to always find. And that looks different on different days. I also wanted to mention that I live in McKinleyville, California, and I'm on the ancestral lands of the Sarai, Tarak, Yurok, Tolowa, and Wyote people.
Beautiful. That's one of my favorite areas in the world. And secret fun fact is I get to go and meet Carrie in person in May. I am very excited about this. I am going to go
Thank
do
you.
some Reiki class with her and take my daughter and her best friend for a trip to Trinidad and the local Humboldt area. So it's one of my favorite places in the world, and to be able to meet Carrie in person is going to be just such a treat. I'm so excited about this trip. So I'm
Thank
glad that you live where you live. And I'm
you.
glad that you've joined us. Tell me a little bit about first, or tell us a little bit first about the local, like your work at the Reiki Healing Center that you have in Trinidad. Like what are you doing?
Well, in Trinidad, I offer a couple weekly yoga classes. If you don't know where Trinidad, so Trinidad is one of the smallest incorporated towns in California. So inside of the town limits, there's about 300 people who live there. And the town, if you've ever lived in a small town, I always say, like, I won the small town lottery, because it has a gas station, a grocery store, an elementary school, and a couple other, good things like restaurants and things like that. But Trinidad's beautiful. It's built up over the sea cliff that's facing the Trinidad Harbor, and it's just a seaside community. It's a big tourist destination. And when I moved there in 2020, it was just this idyllic spot to raise our kids. And my kids go to the elementary school in town. And then there's a healing arts center, so I do Reiki sessions there. And then just kind of created this community, but there's a church. There used to be a church in the town that's kind of been repurposed now as a community center. And so I teach weekly yoga classes there, and I teach most of my Reiki courses there. So Lynn will be at that location when we do our course. And then I make handcrafted malas. Malas are a meditation tool, and so I have them displayed in several businesses in town and in the surrounding area. And they have like summer craft fairs, so it just anything with Trinidad I'm going to try to be involved in as just one of the small businesses in the area. And just the Trinidad is part of a bigger community around us. It's not like we're this 300 person community in the middle of nowhere. There's other towns and cities around us. So just offer my in-person services, throughout the community in different capacities.
Definitely well worth taking a trip there if you want to go someplace beautiful. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous place and just such a cool place to drop in. And I do have clients who come up for a weekend or whatever, and I just tell them where to go, what to see, and then we usually book a few Reiki sessions or something else that they want to do, and add some self-care component to it. So that's been great.
Carrie, tell me what brought you to Reiki. We read in your bio that you have 15 years of experience as a solo practitioner in a woman-owned small business. That's incredible. What brought you to this work initially?
So my first thing was with yoga. So when I was 16, my mom took me to my first yoga class, and there was a person who was leading the class was demonstrating a pose, a wide leg forward fold, which is like your feet are as wide, and then you fold at the waist, and you, like traditionally you touch your head to the floor if you had that level of flexibility. Well, the teacher had that flexibility, and I can't really describe it. I mean, or the words that I've used to describe it is the beginner's mind, or it's a stirring that happens in your heart. But when I saw him in that pose, like, I just knew that yoga was for me. Like, I fell in love with it. My heart moved, my soul moved, something fluttered. And I was like, oh my God, this yoga is amazing. So I, practiced here and there through college and so forth. And then after college, I ended up really getting more involved in the local yoga community. I ended up taking a teacher training in 2007. And then I started teaching yoga, and I was the lucky one to teach the 6 a.m. on Mondays. That was my first foray as a yoga instructor. And my first client was a Reiki practitioner. And she was a mom. She had like 4 or 5 kids, and she would show up earlier than me every Monday. And I'd be there like 5 minutes before, trying to open up the door. But it was a big part of her self-care practice. And she would use Reiki to clear the room before we did yoga. And we just got to know each other since she was one of my more consistent clients. And eventually that led to me doing some treatments with her, and and eventually led me to do all of my Reiki courses with her in 2009. And so I took all of the Reiki. It was really the trainings that opened up so much for me. I got completely enchanted with Reiki. I say it enchanted me. I was like, wow, it's just amazing practice. I could see the energy. I felt it. I had a very strong intuitive sense that Reiki could help me understand my life purpose. And within a couple years, so I finished my Reiki 3 certification, I think in 2010, and then by 2011 I left my corporate job. I went on a pilgrimage to India, and after that trip I decided I just wanted to do Reiki and yoga as my career path and just see where it took me, and that's where here I am. So,
That's beautiful.
yeah, it's been a beautiful journey.
And then you said also that you went to Japan and did some pilgrimage in Japan, right?
Yeah, and
What
that's
was that
something I
like?
always wanted to do. Um, Time, life, finances really got in the way, motherhood got in the way. But in 2023, an opportunity opened itself for me. If you're familiar with Bruce Taylor, he offers some tours through the sacred sites of Japan. And so I went on the tour in 2023 with him and Yakutin Inomoto Sensei. And yeah, it just was such an incredible experience. We were there in May during, I think it's called Cultural Week. I might be saying that wrong, but it's a special week in Japan where they're celebrating and do lots of ceremonies and festivals all over Japan. But Kyoto is really the epicenter of that. And so we got to see just really some very special things, and traveled to Mount Kurama a couple times, but then there's also a mountain pretty close by, Mount Hiei, and that's the center of Japanese Buddhism in Japan. There's tons of different temples, tons of different lineages of Buddhism that are have temples there. But one of the things we got to do is listen to Buddhist monks chant the Lotus Sutra, which is like the main text. So at the root of Reiki, there's this thread of Reiki called Tendai Buddhism, and in Tendai Buddhism it has so many different threads to that. One of them is Zen Buddhism and some other forms of Buddhism, but their main text is the Lotus Sutra. It's like they consider it the most whole and complete teaching of the Buddha. So yeah, listening to monks chant that and just being in that energy was like, yeah, it was really, really powerful.
I was going to ask you if it was with Bruce. Like, if when I ever get to do that tour, that would be who I would go with. In fact, now I'm going to reach out to Bruce and ask him if he'll be on our show, because he's one of the teachers that I have so much deep respect for. So that's awesome that you got to go on that trip.
Yeah, it was a really special trip for sure. Yeah.
Nice.
Carrie, you mentioned that it sounds like, had some similar stirrings with Reiki from the beginning, like you did with yoga, and that it would help you make sense of your life purpose. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the intersection between spirituality and healing or wellness for you.
Well, I think we can easily see how, well, first of all, how yoga and Reiki are really powerful tools to help us rebound, right? We can use it to work through our challenges, our emotional struggles, help us connect more to our body if we tend to just be spinning off in our head, which is a big part of trauma recovery as well. So there's this notion of being well that you're pointing to, which is actually a really interesting concept, and as well as healing, right? And so I think at some point in our journey, if we either identify as healers or just feel like we're on a healing path, um, we have to define what healing means. And for me, the longest time I kind of used this running definition is like getting better, not worse. And so finding some sense of like a progression in life, finding more joy in our life, feeling inspired by purpose. Um, but I've shifted a little bit my definition of healing to being and feeling whole. And I like that definition as well because it allows us to be more in the present and not have this expectation that something's going to get better for us to be more well. Like maybe this is as good as it's going to get, you know? And if we've lived enough days, we've probably seen how life has its ups and downs. And that's something that I think we signed up for when we came into this life was to live through some of life's ups and downs. So wholeness kind of takes away this implied assumption that healing makes us more happy or better or different, perhaps, than how we are today. So I like that notion of wholeness. And as it relates to your guys' work in recovery, you know, Reiki also really helped me, and yoga helped me find some shift out of my own alcoholic tendencies and some drug abuse issues that really peaked its head in my mid 20s. And I was an alcoholic for any, you know, definition and purposes, but you don't see it as that because I was in my 20s and everybody parties like crazy, I guess, or at least the people I was surrounding myself with. But that really felt like it got so out of control. And so when I first found Reiki, I spent about 5 years was completely sober. And that was just such an incredible experience in and of itself. And I find that if you do struggle with addiction in any form, is some part of that is that you have this exceptional energy towards something that gives you joy or whatever, you know, even though it obviously has its downsides and consequences and shadow sides. But for me, it was this just aching desire to understand my purpose that I could actually find a pathway to work with that within the context of yoga and Reiki. But prior to that, I didn't have that. And so I just band-aided that with alcohol and drug abuse. And so for me, the shift that happened when I found Reiki was really being more placing that alcoholic tendency or energy towards finding myself, finding my purpose, finding wellness. And that was a really profound shift, you know, directing that energy into something that felt much more healthy. And
You literally just defined my last 5 years.
Ah,
Just summarized it. I mean, I'm sure I never thought of it that way, but I'm sure that that's exactly what I was doing prior to, and I know it's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. Oh yeah, I can totally relate to what you're saying. Andrea, can you read that definition of recovery we had talked about before we started taping? I want the viewers, Carrie had asked us a good question of like, you know, how are we defining recovery? And Andrea had a good response that I wanted to throw in here.
yeah. So my background, and I usually say this at the beginning, but we're a little out of practice. We did have a month off. We had a break.
We took the area.
We did take a break. So my background is in clinical counseling and psychology and working in community mental health with folks that have or had co-occurring mental health conditions, which just means that there is both a substance use disorder and another mental health condition. To me, it's the same, right? They're both mental health conditions. But we would always refer back. I had a fantastic clinical supervisor and professor who specialized in group work, and we would always refer back to SAMHSA's definition of recovery. And so this is their working definition. Recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential.
Beautiful. Thank you. Carrie, you mentioned that one of the things that you're in recovery from is your recent divorce. Now that we have kind of a definition and we know some of your tools, we've talked about a lot of different topics on the show. Divorce has not been one, although it touches so many people's lives, including my own. So I mean, I'm divorced, I'm married now, but divorce recovery is a really big thing. And I want to just honor and thank you for being willing to be vulnerable and to come on the show and talk about what you've been going through and how your strength and resilience and the tools that you have informed your divorce recovery.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is. Yeah, not an easy topic and not something easy to walk through. I think, it's really dramatically changed my life and how I see the world, how I see myself. And I'm working through it. So our divorce was finalized last August, and we've been separated about a year and a half. And there was a lot of stuff leading up to that, of course, as well. So it's just been like a big dark night of the soul for sure. So, I think the things that have been really helping me recover from this, I kind of took it from a place of how am I recovering emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially. And those all things really kind of blend together, different aspects of my journey. But one of the things that I've really learned along the way is that divorce is an emotional and relationship rupture, right? There's this massive rupture between two people, and then we have two children as well, so they're also, of course, involved with it. It's a shift in our family dynamic, which is huge. And so when I come back to this notion of wholeness, that's kind of where it was really tender, like I had this feeling of wholeness with my family. It was one of my most meaningful things that I've ever manifested in my life. I've always wanted to have a family and children and a marriage and all of that. And so, I was very heavily invested in the relationship and our life together and our family. And this emotional rupture, it leaves us not feeling whole, right? And so my journey to recovery has been working through some of my codependency stuff. Like, why do I need somebody else to make me feel whole? And I noticed it was like about 9 months after the divorce, like I just started having fun with my kids again. And it just felt like nothing was missing. Like I could just be in our little world and our dynamic and feel really good about being with my kids. So it took that time. And also working more intentionally with this definition of wholeness and seeking to find wholeness within myself, I found that actually that emotional rupture that can happen inside of a divorce and really in the ending of any relationship, like it can heal quick. I mean, it can heal fairly quick. It doesn't, there's a lot of things that of course had to be released and expectations that I had thought my life was going to look a certain way, and it wasn't going to turn out that way. So it definitely took its time and took its toll emotionally, but there was this feeling of like, oh wow, like I can find this sense of wholeness in the family unit I have now. So that was really freeing, I think. The other really fortunate thing that happened like coincided basically with my separation is that I was able to have the time and space to invest in a 9-month Vedic astrology course. And so I did this 9-month Vedic astrology course alongside those first really important months of my divorce and separation. And that was a weekly class, like 3 hours. We would get together and we do a lot of expressive art therapy. We look closely at transits and charts and just learn the depth of Vedic astrology as a healing system. And that was profound. And so, some aspect of Vedic astrology is helping you find your life purpose. And I could now like reflect on all of these choices that I've made, since I became a yoga instructor and Reiki practitioner, and be like, oh my God, I was totally following my purpose as it's written in the stars, not necessarily how it's written in our society and our culture. But it was so clear to me, like, oh wow, exactly why I was drawn to Reiki, why I'm drawn to yoga, why I find these healing arts to be such a powerful tool for both my own healing, but also something that I know that part of my calling, part of my purpose is to share that with others through in my capacities that I can. So through my business, and just through the healing work that I feel very privileged to be able to do.
Somebody didn't know what Vedic astrology is. Would you give us a working definition? I know what astrology is, but I don't know what Vedic astrology is.
Yeah, sure. So Vedic astrology comes from Hinduism, and so does yoga. Yoga is mentioned in the Vedas, and the Vedas are like the foundation text of the Hindu worldview, religious worldview, and so forth. And so is Vedic astrology. So those texts are thousands of years old, and as they're written, and then probably thousands of years of oral tradition before that. So Vedic astrology is the eighth limb of the Vedas. I'm not sure what the yogic one is, but it's called the eye of the Vedas. And Vedic astrologers understood how to track the planets through various methods, even thousands of years ago, and started developing a system to help you find, more self-knowledge, there's 4 main things that Vedic astrology helps you connect with. It's your dharma or your life purpose, your wealth, and your relationships, and what brings you healing or what brings you liberation in life. And so it's just this really ancient and incredible tool to understand yourself. Now, many cultures have different astrological traditions, and there's probably some cultural exchange that was happening that they, were learning from each other. But Vedic astrology is very clearly knew how to do the way we track planets through the Western astrology system. And they intentionally chose not to use that system because they knew it would get inaccurate over time. So Western astrology was birthed about 500 years ago. And in Western astrology, you just use a different way to track the planets, but it becomes more inaccurate over the years. So after every 72 years, it's off a degree. So right now, I think there was a recent full moon in Leo in the Western system, but in the Vedic system, it was actually in Cancer. And so, if you are born, it's 23 degrees off, which each house is about 30 degrees. So oftentimes it's skewed almost a house in the difference between those two systems. And I don't like to say one is better than the other, but that's just kind of one of the strengths of Vedic astrology, besides its, long tradition in the Indian worldview.
This is something that I'm very interested in. I feel like I've always, looking back at the threads of my life, like you said, it sounds like your recovery from divorce, the change in your family system allowed you to do a lot of self-reflection, and studying Vedic astrology allowed you to go back and look at the things that you were drawn to, like yoga, from the very beginning. And for me, the thread has always been spirituality, like finding meaning in life, and purpose and creativity. And I don't really see them as separate anymore. I think I did for a long time. And so I like the way you described it as a healing system, because I often think that people who are, maybe skeptical or just don't have that openness or understanding, um, it's difficult to talk about what the benefit of studying that might be. And it is that inner knowledge, which, when you study psychology, obviously it's something you're interested in learning more about yourself and learning more about other people. Um, I'm wondering if you had any specific insights about yourself that you might share through that program, through that year-long study.
Well, I can explain one of the reasons why I feel like, oh wow, it makes total sense that I was drawn to yoga. So my Venus is in the sixth house. The sixth house is the house of healer and healing. And I actually have three planets in the sixth house, which is called a stellium. So it means that there's like going to be a focus and a concentration in that aspect of my life, healer and healing. Makes complete sense. And then what's called your Atmakaraka planet. So your Atmakaraka planet is the highest planet in the sky at the time of your birth. And that planet is said to like be the most telling for your life path and purpose. It's where you have both karma, but also it's like where you will have the most evolution, growth, liberation, of feeling like you're connected to your destiny. So Venus is in my sixth house. And then Venus has this very special placement that the way it is written, it's like this, it's directly related to yoga. And I'm blanking on the name exactly. There's a Sanskrit word for it, but it basically like is aligned with like having the highest manifestation of yogic powers, this Venus thing, which I will take that with a lot of humility, because that's not exactly like I've been this international yoga superstar, but I absolutely love yoga and it's been a big part of my path. So that felt quite, aligned for me, or just something where like, wow, I could like actually lean into that as a strength. And so that's some of the things that you get to learn with Vedic astrology is like, oh, wow, like this is actually a strength, but also some of those strengths come with its challenges too. So that's one thing I learned. Other things, there's the third house, which you might be interested in, Andrea, because it's a house of hands and expressive arts. And so I have some alignment towards that as well. In my chart. So working with hands, healing with hands, or having that connection with hands in the sixth house. So all of that is part of the poetry. It's just absolutely an interpretive, intuitive healing art. So I can place meaning as to what it means for me, but I can't really do that for anybody else, but I can give people indications of what that could mean or what it might feel like. Have those kinds of alignments.
Yes, I'm thinking of your malas, right? How perfect. That's a perfect example of that. Creating those mala beads for yourself and for other people. What's something that you would suggest to someone who is new to maybe Reiki, or maybe new to healing, somebody who is a person who is, say, recovering from divorce? I think, we talked about before we started recording, we talked about both practice and community. So one of the ways that Lynn and I got connected was through She Recovers, which is a community for women and non-binary folks that are in recovery from all of the things, right? Any life circumstance. And for me, a lot of the practice has become both doing self Reiki, making time for creativity, those sorts of things. If someone was new to this path, what advice would you give them?
I would give them advice to get a mental health professional that you really trusted and could really hold you through the first, few months of the divorce or just the whole process. I had that for a period of time, and then I actually had a falling out with my therapist, which was really hard too. So, I think sometimes when you're really going through something, it's just helpful to have somebody on your team that you can really share all of the messy details with. And because I think with friends and even community members, sometimes you just can't really fully, you don't give yourself an hour every week to tell them what's going on and how things are evolving. And so having just a weekly check-in with a therapist was super helpful. I really needed that. I think leaning into the communities where you feel supported and that you can show up and be yourself. So the Reiki Women Podcast was a big part of that. My friends on the podcast, I don't know. There was at least a couple weeks where we didn't even film. We just talked and cried and shared our own stories and reflected on how, intense losing a relationship really is, and the strength you have to find within yourself to acknowledge that it's not okay and that it's not working out. And that was a big part of my own process, I think. I don't know. But and then for me, it's also been it's just a journey too. So I guess that would be the other things that I would say. Because a big part of my journey was finding the home that I just moved in. I closed on my house 2 weeks ago and moved, and that has been such a huge part of it, because part of the emotional rupture was almost immediately losing the home that we had together, our marital home, or had to leave the marital home. And all of those dynamics I could have done. If I did it differently, I would have done it differently. So that would have been also helpful to have known and been more resourced in those kind of critical decisions, right, as you separate. I would give that advice to somebody. But, part of the rupture was leaving this home in Trinidad that we just absolutely adored. I adored. And trying to find a way to support myself financially and have a stable home for my kids was a big journey. And I always thought that I really couldn't buy a home because I'm self-employed, and I've been self-employed for 15 years. And that's always been a barrier to buying a home in previous relationships and previous opportunities. And I was totally able to qualify for a home, and I was super grateful. And basically from the moment we separated, that was the next leg of the journey, was how am I going to find a stable home for me and the kids? And that was one of the goals in our relationship as we divorced. And so I feel really grateful that my ex is really supportive in that way. Both felt like it was the big, one of our biggest priorities was to get me into a home that I can afford and that is a stable place for our kids that we can co-parent from. So for me, that was a huge, year and a half of my life over the last few years. But then now I feel, even though it's been just 2 weeks, I'm trying to not go on any other journeys right now and just be okay with where I am right now. But there's also a lot of, financial stuff that I need to, need to expand my income in order to continue to be able to afford my life. So there's just a lot of pressures as a single parent. And so I'm really feel very resourced in that. And I just think that like almost look at the example of almost any woman who's left a relationship that wasn't supporting her, that wasn't healthy, and she gets it done. She finds a way. We will find a way. And so I'm in the process of that. And I think just to trust that you can do it, you can do it. You can do amazing things.
It sounds like you're doing a lot of amazing things already.
Thanks, Andrea.
I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what I know of Carrie. Carrie and I haven't talked a lot privately, but I've known her for a couple of years, one of which is through Reiki Women Podcast. And if you go back, I don't even know how many episodes, Andrea and I were actually guests on the Reiki Women Podcast ourselves, back when we were just starting out in this journey together. Um, and Michaela, who has been a guest a couple of times on our show, is one of the three Reiki women, and then Bronwyn Logan is the third. And I will be reaching out to her to join our show as well. But one of the things that I know and really like about all three women, and Carrie in particular, because you've been mentioning this a lot lately on social media, is you've stopped using the word Reiki master and you use the word Reiki practitioner, and just kind of this real humility. You just mentioned that you're not a yogic rock star or something like that. I'm not sure the words you used, but um, you just do you, and you are very mindful about the words that you use and how you promote yourself, and making sure that you're talking about the Japanese system of Reiki and being really mindful about not stepping on cultural toes and things like that. And it's that's been like an inspiration to me as I watch all three of you, but also you in particular. And sorry, um, you and I are very aligned in terms of like just all of the things going on in this country and this world, like how to stand up for, sorry, I'm not emotional. This is just a throat thing. How to stand up for ourselves and our beliefs and living our values without, resulting into, going low and being, attacking. There's just a way to live your values and practice with using our spiritual tools daily to keep our own sympathetic parasympathetic nervous systems rooted and grounded in humility. And so I know that was a huge ramble. All of that to say, I appreciate how humble you are, but I would also say you are kind of a rock star. You know what you're doing. And so I'm excited to be going to one of your classes, and I hope that something in this conversation will spark that for somebody else, because you've been out there offering like a true path back to yourself and to wholeness through Reiki, through yoga, and now obviously through Vedic astrology. Um, so I hope that people will take you up on your offerings.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes we don't have to hold both, both hold both our accomplishments, all we've created, and how hard I've worked, to be who I am. And I'm really proud of myself. I'm really proud of who I am today. I'm proud of my accomplishments. Um, Grateful for the support and strength that I have. But it was something I had to resource within myself, and the practice of Reiki in particular has been so helpful with that. I don't know, I would not be who I am without Reiki, for sure. And I don't know how many times I've been put in a position where I'm in a really weird place where I have to figure it out, as a small business owner, solo practitioner. And so that's one of my drives to create community, is to have other people who are doing the same work, this deep healing work, and doing it inside of oneself, yet, and also sharing it with others, but maybe not feeling a whole lot of support for themselves in that process, or community, or connection, or just friendship. I think Carolyn May said in one of her things, like, in the journey of the soul, you need to have people who know how intense it is. You need to have people who've walked through that path and walked that fire themselves too, and find that connection. And so that's one of my drives to create community, is to make sure other people, have somebody that they can reach out to, or place that they can reach out to. Yeah, and then in terms of just the languaging of the Reiki Master stuff, it's just been something that I just, in 2020 is around the time when George Floyd was murdered. And we saw just massive protests, not just in the United States, but really all around the world, seeking to end this incredible systemic violence against African American people. As part of that is, in the yoga community, is a drive, a push towards looking through the decolonization lens. And in decolonization, we try to unpack hierarchy and power dynamics in any community, but especially in spiritual communities. And it invites us to reflect on how our words, subtly or unconsciously, draw in a certain type of person and exclude other people. Right? And so we're using the word Reiki Master just inherently excludes African American people. Right? I mean, you wouldn't want to be in a community or group where everybody's running around proudly proclaiming I'm a master or something, because what does that mean? Does that mean there's somebody who's the subject of that? And I know that this context really matters, right? In the Reiki community, it's not like we have that context around the word Reiki Master, but so for somebody else whose ancestors who've been enslaved, they might not be able to separate a different context from that word. And I think it reflects, I wrote a blog called Why I No Longer Call Myself a Reiki Master. But one of my concluding points is, in the Japanese language, there's this word called kotodama. And kotodama is the spiritual energy of the words that we use. And I think that there's something to that, right? There's the spiritual energy that we connect with when we're using a word like master as opposed to practitioner, or a word like teacher as opposed to master. And that's just something I think would be important for the Reiki community to reflect on. And I think most of us in the Reiki world don't feel comfortable with the word Reiki Master. And if you look at the word and how it's translated in the West, it's all really a product of, stereotypes, racism, Orientalism that was so rampant at the time when Reiki migrated to the United States, right during World War II. So it's good to reclaim, words that really have more meaning, feel more aligned. Allow us to really step into our practice in a deeper, more meaningful way.
And you have a current offering, right, of a decolonization class, or right? Help me with the wording, but I know you're teaching that.
Yeah, so I have a workshop coming up. It's called Decolonize Your Reiki Practice. And it's 2.5 hours in the workshop setting, talking about the principles of decolonization and how they might apply to the practice of Reiki. And then it includes a follow-up Q&A, so it gives us a few days to kind of take a step back from all of the content and then come back together with questions and discussion. And so it's a live offering. It's happening on February 28th at the end of this month. But if you're watching this after the fact, I also sell it as its own self-study course if you want to take it outside of the time that I have to offer it live.
Fabulous. Well, there will be a link in the bottom of this on YouTube for people to follow to get in touch with you. I think probably we should wrap it up. We've been chatting for a while. I don't want it to go too long, but is there any final thoughts from either of you that you'd like to share?
Well, Carrie, I just really want to thank you for sharing so openly about your experience, especially with your recovery from divorce. I think that's a really important topic, and I'm just so impressed with the things that you're doing to take care of yourself, to take care of your family, and to support your your students and your clients. They're very, very lucky to have you. So thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about this and just give some light to it. When I was a young mom, like raising my kids, everybody's told, oh, you should tell your work around other young moms and stuff. And I was like, I can't do that right now. I just can't do that. I don't have, I'm in it. I'm in the trenches right now. So I feel like I've been that way with my divorce as well. It's like, I'm in the trenches, but, I just want any woman listening to this who's also recovering from a divorce, like, it's gonna get better. It's really important to keep an eye on that, and that you're not alone. And it's like it's not a club that anybody really wanted to be a part of, but here we are. How many women are a part of it? I mean, so many. So we're not alone, and it's so important to remember that. Don't feel alone in the journey, and seek out community. Some people who are there could really be part of your support system. And of course, reach out to me, Lynn, Andrea, anyone that you need that could really help you in the healing capacity too.
Thank you both. It's been really, really nice to just kind of have this relaxing chat. I feel very like refreshed and kind of like centered, and I just want to take a minute and drink my tea and reflect after this because been a lot to digest. Can't wait to learn more from you, especially Vedic astrology. Now want you to do my chart. So I'll be connecting.
Yay.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.